Hello, everybody. Welcome to another class with Web Yeshiva. I'm David Sedley, and we are continuing our series on the Shemoneh Esrei in depth. Today, we're going to speak about the prayer known as the Kedusha prayer, which is the third of the brachot and the final of the set which makes up the first three brachot. Before I begin the shir, I want to dedicate it to the memory of two soldiers who are in my son's unit who were killed last night in Gaza, Ayal Avnion and Nadav Gnola. My son was on his way home when this happened. They were killed, and 8 other guys from his unit are injured, so we pray for refuah shlema for them. So let's talk about kedusha. Now, kedusha is different than the previous two brachot and most of the other brachot because there are two versions of it. There's one that we say when we are alone, and a version that we say when we have 10 men, when we have a minyan, and that's in Chazarat HaShatz. So the simple version of the blessing that we say in our silent Amidah and that we say when we're not praying with the minyan is Ata Kadosh, V'Shimcha Kadosh, U'Kedoshim B'chol Yom Yaralucha Sela. You, God, are holy, and your name is holy, and holy beings praise you every day. Sela. And then we end, Baruch Ata ha-Shem, Hakel HaKadosh, blessed are you, the holy God. So we have the word Kadosh, clearly is the main theme here. It's repeated 3 times before the end and once in the ending. So I want to talk, as well as talking about the bracha it's specifically, I want to talk tonight about the concept of kedusha and what that is. But first, let's go to the repetition of the Amidah. Here we have one of the biggest, one of the many differences between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, and even within the Ashkenazim, well, between Ashkenazim and Nusach Sephard, but I'm just going to simplify it to the two major distinctions. So when we repeat the Amidah, there is a concept, Siman Tzadik in Shulchan Aruch, which says, Ein Devar Shebekdusha Pachot Me'asara, that you need things that have a status of holiness. You need to have 10 men. We actually learn that from this past week's Torah reading from the spies. Moshe sent 12 spies to spy out the land of Israel. 2 of them, Yehoshua and Caleb, came back with positive reports about Israel. The other 10 came back with bad reports of the land of Israel. And Moshe says, Ad matai la'edah hazot, how long are you going to listen to this congregation? So he's referring to the 10 spies with their bad reports and calls them a congregation. And the Gemara in Brachot learns from Edah to Kedusha, learns through juxtaposition of words, that for anything where you have Kedusha, you need to have 10 men, I guess, as a correction, as an antidote, as a permanent way of fixing the sin of the spies. So when we have 10 and we repeat the Amidah at Shachrit and Mincha, we say, and on Shabbat at Musaf, it's slightly different, and festival slightly different, but fundamentally, we say, or the Chazan says, Nikadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, let us sanctify your name in the world, Kashem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom, in the same way that they, presumably the angels, sanctify it in the heavens. Kakatov al yad neviyecha, as it is written in the words of your prophets, V'kara zeh el zeh ve'amar, they, the angels, called to one another and said, Kadosh, 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 holy, 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 ha-Shem tzavakot, the Lord of hosts, Melo kol haaretz kavado, the whole earth is filled with his glory. And then we continue. The Shliach Tzibur says, Le'umatam Baruch Yameru, they face, those facing the others, each face the others, then they say Baruch, and the congregation says, Baruch Kavod Hashem Mem Kamo, blessed is the glory of God from his place. I want to talk about place as well soon. And then we end of Divrei Kodshecha Katuv Lemor, in your holy writings it says, Yimloch Hashem Le'olam, let God will reign forever. Elokayach Zion, your God, Zion, Lador Vador, for all generations. Hallelujah. Praise God. That is the Ashkenazi version. Sephardi version is similar, but significantly different. So we have, they say, Lador Vador Nagid Gadlecha. I didn't mean to do that. Did I turn 2 pages? I just made a mistake. Sorry, the Shliach Tzibur ends, the Lador Vador will say your praise for every generation. I'm going to just skip that. The Sephardi version, Nakdishach v'naritzach, we will sanctify you and we will revere you. Kinoam siach, sod sarfei kodesh, like the not pleasant conversation of the sod is the secret, but here's the convocation of the holy seraphim, the fiery angels, Hamishalashim lecha kedusha, who give you threefold holiness. V'chein katuv al yad neviecha, and it also says by your at the hands of your prophets. V'kara zeh al zeh v'amar, they called to one another and said, Kadosh, 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 Hashem tzvos melech haolam. So that line is the same. L'umatam mishabchim v'omrim, they turn to each other and they praise and they say, Baruch Kvod Hashem Mem Kamo. That again is the same. We'll say, God will reign forever in Zion for all generations. So, and then they don't say the last bit that Ashkenazim say, which is the Dor Vador. I've lost the place. Come on, click it. The Ashkenazim say the Dor Vador Nagid Gadlecha Netzachim. Sfaradim just go to the bracha that Ashkenazim say in the silent Amidah. You are holy, your name is holy, and holy beings praise you every day. Baruch Hashem Hakel HaKadosh, blessed are you, the holy God. So those are the words of Kedusha. Now I want to get, this is how to say Kedusha. I'm going to look at halachic sources, but I think the halacha is a reflection of a very deep hashkafa. So I think the halacha is interesting because I'm prepared to, well, I won't bet, but I suspect that many of you, and certainly many of the people in every shul I've been to, don't say Kedusha in the way that the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah say we should say Kedusha. But also I think there are several very deep hashkafic ideas in these halachot. So here's the technical details how to say Kedusha. Shulchan Aruch says, Ein hatzibur omrim im shliach tzibur nakti shecha. The congregation should not recite the words of the chazan, right? Nakti shecha or nikadesh shimcha, whatever, all the words that are the chazan. Ele shotkin, they should be quiet. Umekavnin lama shliach tzamir, they should listen, have intent to what the shliach tzibur is saying. Ad shemagia lekedusha, until the chazan gets to the word kedusha, va'az onim hatzibur kadosh, 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 and then the congregation answers kadosh. Right. So I would venture to say every shul I've been in, apart from one, most of the people say the words of the chazan before the chazan says it, and then the chazan says it, and then the congregation says the next line and the next line for the chazan as well. I don't know if any siddurim say to do it that way. Usually the siddur says, maybe the Art Scroll does. Usually the siddur says this is the line of the Chazan, this is the line of the congregation. But for some reason, the custom is to not follow the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch, but to say the congregation, well, everybody says both parts. And then Rama adds, V'yesh lisa ha'inayim lemarom b'shah shamrim kedusha. You should raise your eyes towards heaven. Raise your eyes upwards when you say kedusha. Again, I don't know if I've seen most people do that specifically, but I guess if I would have raised my eyes to heaven, I wouldn't have noticed what everyone else was doing. Similarly, we shake our bodies and raise them up from the ground. Now this is the 3 times kind of rising up on your toes when we say kadosh, 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 and Baruch Shem Kol Malchuto and Yimloch. We kind of try and elevate ourselves towards heaven. You may not speak in the middle of kedusha. That is, I think, one that people do know and follow. And then another halacha, Misha Amar Seder Kedusha, Ba'al Beit Knesset, if somebody has already prayed elsewhere, has already said Kedusha, and then he comes to a shul, or Matzah Tzibor in Kadosh, and he finds that the shul is up to Kedusha, Chosev Anei Mahen, he should join in with them and say the Kedusha with them. So that's a halacha everybody knows, but I suspect that the 2 halachot that people don't know are to be quiet when the Shliach Tzibur is saying his part, and to raise your eyes heavenward. Now that is, well, actually, let's look at the Mishnah Berurah first. The Mishnah Berurah tries to justify the custom that we have in our shuls to say both parts. There are some who are lenient, that you can say along with the Shliach Tzibur, with the Chazan, say his part as well. But the correct custom is to do what the Shulchan Aruch said. This is typical of the Mishnah Berurah. He tries to introduce new customs by saying that they're the original custom. So he looks around and every shul he sees, well, the shul he sees in Radin, everybody says both parts, but he says the correct custom, which he's probably never seen in real life, and if he did, it was only after he wrote his book. The main custom, the correct custom, is follow the Shulchan Aruch and to not say the parts of the Chazan. Because the Achronim follow the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch. And fundamentally, the Mishnah Berurah is trying to introduce customs of the Vilna Gaon, and that was the Vilna Gaon's custom to be quiet during Kedusha, during the Chazan's parts. And when I said every shul I've davened in except for one, the one shul that followed the Shulchan Aruch was a shul that follows the custom of the Vilna Gaon. Nevertheless, it says the custom nowadays is that the congregation also says the Chazan's parts. So when he says the Achronim follow the Shulchan Aruch, I really struggle to find anybody who said that the correct thing to do is the way we do it nowadays. And yet the custom is to do it the way we do it nowadays. And as we know, custom is stronger than halacha. So that's the custom, and that's what we should do because that's the custom. But if you were in a place, hypothetically, where there was no custom, then the correct thing to do would be to not say the Chazan's parts out loud. Now, that's just a purely technical thing. It's not really, has no, I don't see any deeper meaning in that other than this is the halacha. But I do want to look at, are we looking upwards when we say Kedusha? Well, the Ashkenazim are, as the Ramah says, but the Torah says, the Torah, I know, I'm not going in backwards chronology, the Torah precedes the Shulchan Aruch by 100 and something years. But he says, Nohagim b'nei Sfarad l'tenehem lamata b'shah shomrim kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. The custom, and the Torah was written by Yaakov ben Asher, who lived part of his life in Spain and part of his life in Germany or France, maybe even Eastern Europe. So he knows both customs, which the Shulchan Aruch may or may not have known what Ashkenazi custom was. The Ramah probably did not know what Sephardi custom was, even though he knew what the halacha was. So the Sephardim, says the Torah, the Sephardim look downwards when they say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. But the Jews of Germany and France, they look upwards. And they lift themselves up upwards. Now, the Beit Yosef points out the Sephardim also jump up, raise themselves upwards. There's like a comma missing from the Torah. So everybody elevates themselves physically when they're saying it, but Sephardim look downwards and Ashkenazim look upwards. V'smach leminhagam, the basis for this custom, Sefer Hechalot, is from this Kabbalistic book called Sefer Hechalot, which I don't fully understand, but I'll pretend I do for the sake of the shiur. Bruchim atem l'Hashem, Shamayim, I think, or maybe there's some words missing. God says you are blessed to God. V'yodei merkava, so the heavens and those who come down from the heavenly chariot. Im tamru v'tagidu livnai ma she'ani oseh b'shah shemakdishin v'omrim kadosh kadosh kadosh. You should tell my children what I, God, do when they sanctify me and they say kadosh kadosh kadosh. V'nemdu otam she'eneim nosim lemarom lebeit tfilatam. You should teach them to cast their eyes heavenwards, to look upwards to the place where their prayers will go. V'nosim atzmam lemala, and they should lift themselves upwards. Ki ein li hana ba'olam ke'ota sha'ah she'eneim nosot be'enai ve'enai be'eneihem. Because God says, I have no greater enjoyment of the world like that moment when they look me in the eyes and I look them in the eyes. I don't know what God's eyes means. I don't know what the chariot riders mean. I don't understand anything except that this Kabbalistic work says that you should look upwards when saying kedusha. Obviously, we're all bothered by the physicality of this, saying that heaven is up. Heaven, whatever heaven is not in a physical place, but symbolically it's up. We know when Yeshua leads the Israelites in the fight against Amalek, Moshe stands on the mountain and holds his hands up, and when the Israelites look at Moshe's hands, they're victorious. So when they don't, or when he lowers his hands, they're not. Symbolically, looking upwards is being aware of the holiness, being aware of God. So we Ashkenazim physically look upwards, but that's not to say that we believe that God or heaven are sitting, in a physical throne in a physical sky in any kind of way at all. Anyway, this Kabbalistic work says we should look upwards, and the Sephardim, according to the Torah, look downwards. And I think that is a very deep hashkafic division in how to understand the words of Kedusha. So I'm going to get to that. There's another dispute. This is a dispute within the Ashkenazi community and presumably within the Sephardi community as well, which I don't really have an insight into, but just for the record, when you're looking upwards, Mishnah Berurah says, look upwards, but have your eyes closed. It would be not with your eyes open. That would be, I guess it's this idea as if you're really staring at God. You're trying to see God by looking at the ceiling, right? You're looking upwards metaphorically. You're closing your eyes because God isn't physically there. There's nothing to see. Maybe that's the view of the Taz, of David Siegel, who lived in Poland in the 17th century. Aval harbe achronim cholkin al zeh. Many of the Achronim disagree with the Taz that you should have your eyes closed. Upasak Magen Giborim Kamotam, and the Magen Giborim, to be honest, I don't know who he is. He rules like them that you should have your eyes open when you're staring upwards. So again, I don't know what the root of that disagreement is, but I'm going to have an attempt to explain the root of the disagreement between whether you're looking up or you're looking down. And just while we're doing Siman Kuf Kaf Hey, which is the Shulchan Aruch on Kedusha, the second halacha there is Tov likaven raglav b'shah she'omer kedusha im shliach tzibur. It's good to have your feet aligned, 2 feet together, when you say kedusha with the shliach tzibur. We talked about this, I think, in the second shiur, that we want to emulate the angels. So the angels are praising God, we're praising God. Angels only have 1 foot, so we put our feet together. And we talked there about the Yerushalmi has dispute whether your feet are side by side or heel to toe. We do side by side. So you should have your feet together to be like the angels. But now, so I want to talk about, well, no, hold that thought about eyes up or eyes down. I'm going to take a slight detour, because when we say kadosh, 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 we say the word holy 3 times, and we kind of raise higher and higher and higher. So I guess we're imagining that we're getting more and more holy as we go, perhaps. But later on in Shacharit, in the Amidah, we read the translation, the Aramaic translation of the verse of the 3 holinesses. So we should be aware of that as well when we say kedusha, right? We say in Uva L'Tzion, V'ata kadosh. This is quoting the verse in Yechezkel. You are holy, Yoshev Tilot Yisrael, sitting on the prayers of Israel. V'kara ze'el ze v'amar, the angels call to each other and they say, Kadosh, 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 Hashem tzvot no'akaratz kavado. Holy, holy, holy is God. The whole earth is filled with His glory. And then we read the Aramaic translation. U'mikablin den min den. They receive permission one from the other. Right? Karazel, they're calling to each other saying, may we say kedusha now. V'amrin, and then they say, Kadish b'shmei merama ilah beit shchinte. Holy is God in the heavenly, supernal, heavenly upper place, the house of His divine presence. Then Kadish al ara ovad gevurte. Holy is God on earth, the work of His strength. Kadish la'alam olam me'al maya, and holy is God forever and ever. Ha-Shem tzvakot. Malya kol ara ziv yikare. The entire earth is filled with His glory. I guess, very simple reading. Ashkenazim are looking up because God is holy in the heights of heaven. Sfaradim are looking downwards because God is holy on earth. So those are the 2 holies, and then the third holy is in time. So there's place and time, and God is holy in all of those. But I want to go a bit deeper into this idea of God's place when we talk about God's place, because there's a contradiction in what we say in the Amidah. We start off by saying Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Hashem Kos Melok Kol Ha'oz Kavado. So God is holy, and the whole earth is filled with God's glory. Right? So if I want to find God's glory, I just look at the earth, the world, the universe, whatever that is. I find God's glory, and then the next line I say, Baruch Kavod Hashem Mim Kamor. Blessed is God's glory from its place. Like I don't know where it is, wherever it happens to be. I don't know. So I start off saying, I know where God's glory is. It's the whole earth is filled with God's glory, and then I say, wherever it is, it should be blessed. Now, this is kind of the dichotomy we have every time we say a blessing, any kind of blessing to God. We say, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, God. I'm speaking to you. I have a direct connection, right? As if you're in the world with me. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam. And then I switch to third person as if I don't know where you are or who I'm talking to. And I say, I don't know, Borei pri hagaf, and He creates the fruit of the vine. Hamotzi lechem ha'aretz, He brings food out of the earth. Shehakol nia bidvaro, everything exists by His word. So I started with atah, I'm speaking to you, God, and then I switch to the third person as if, wherever you are, I'll just say this idea to somebody else about you. So that's a microcosm of what we have here in Kedusha, that we begin by saying God's glory fills the earth, and then as soon as we try and find God's glory in the earth, we say, well, wherever it's gone, I don't know, wherever it is, it should be blessed. So I kind of want to understand, before we understand what Kedusha is, I want to understand what Makom is, right? Where is God's glory? So the Gemara in Chagiga talks about this. Not that I understand it, not that most people understand it, but we'll try anyway. So the Gemara in Chagiga, as you know, the second chapter has 2 or 3 pages of Gemara talking about Kabbalistic ideas about the mystical chariot, Maisa Merkava, Maisa Bereshit. We have the story of Rabbi Akiva and the 3 students who go into the Pardes, and different rabbis make drashot on Kabbalistic ideas. Anyway, so in the middle of this in Chagiga, Va'era achayot v'hinei ofan echad ba'aretz etzel achayot. So Yechezkel says in this vision he has, right? Chapter 1 of Yechezkel is the vision of the dry bones and the chariot, and who knows what's going on there. And he says, I looked at these chayot, these angels, and ofan echad, there was one ofan, which they put wheel, but it's a kind of angel, maybe, is on the ground next to the chayot, which is another kind of angel. Rabbi Elazar says, Malach echad shu omed ba'aretz. There is an angel who stands on the earth. V'rosho mikiyetz ha'chayot. And he's so tall, again, I think tall is a physical word, I don't think it's a physical idea, but he's so tall that his head reaches to wherever the chayot are in this higher place, the chayot angels. B'manit Tanas Sandalfon Shemoneh. In a bright it says the name of this angel who stands on the earth is Sandalfon. Ha-Gavoa mechavero malech 500 shana. He's taller than all the other angels. He's 500 years tall. I don't know what 500 years, the time it would take to travel 500 years. Va'omed acharei ha-merkava, and he stands behind this divine chariot. V'koshek tarim lekono, and he ties crowns for God. Again, this presumably is not meant to be understood physically, but whatever this angel is doing in English words or in human words, we say he's tying, he's making daisy chains, he's making crowns for his master. Aini, so the Gemara says, what are you talking about? How does he know where God is? Haktiv, it says, Baruch kavod Hashem mimkamo, blessed is God from wherever he is. Michlal de mikomo leka diyadele, that implies that nobody knows where God's place is. Right? And if nobody knows, then how can Sandalfon make crowns for God's head, or for God, if he doesn't know where God is? So Dam Hashem ataga v'azna v'yativ bereshe. You're right. Sandalfon doesn't know where God is, but he says a name for the crown, and the crown flies off by itself and lands on God's head. Why did I quote this? To show that the phrase Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkamo means we don't know where God is. In contrast to Melo Kol Aretz Kavodo, the whole earth is filled with God's glory. I guess the answer to my question from before, Ashkenazim, I think, look up because we don't know where God is. So we can't look down at the earth because wherever he is, maybe our eyes are closed, maybe our eyes are open. Sfarim look down at the earth because God is everywhere you look. God is there. God is everywhere in the earth. And I'm going to develop this idea a bit more, but that's the basic thesis of this idea, that on the one hand, God is beyond anything we have. He's outside of the world. We can't find him. And on the other hand, he completely fills the world. And this is a very fundamental Kabbalistic idea. The Midrash Tanchuma says similar kind of idea. Kedoshim to you. Pasha Kedoshim. Be holy. Amar Rabbi Pinchas HaKohen Bar Chama. Amar Rabbi Reuven. So Rabbi Pinchas HaKohen Bar Chama says in the name of Rabbi Reuven, My dichtiv, what does the verse mean in Yechezkel? Again with Yechezkel. Vaishmachai kol rashgad. All I heard a great sound behind me. Mahu acharai. What do you mean behind me? After me. Amar Yechezkel. So Yechezkel said, Mishiki lastiv ani v'chavarai. When I praised God, me and my friends, Shamati shemalachei Hashem mekalsin oto acharai. I heard that the angels are praising God after me. Va'omrim, and they say, Baruch kavod Hashem mimkamo. Blessed is God, is the glory of God from his place. Meaning that the angels who say kedusha to God, the way we say it in kedusha, right? They call to one another and they say kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. But actually, we have to say it first, and then they call to each other and say kadosh, 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 according to this Midrash Tanchuma. And when they're calling, they're asking for permission, saying, have the Jews on earth said kedusha yet, can we say it too? Which is very empowering. Right? The angels are waiting for us to say kedusha before they can say kedusha. Anyway, Tedalecha, and you can know that this is true because when Moshe went up to Mount Sinai, to heaven, to get the Torah, he heard the angels praising the God in this way, with Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkomo. Yerad v'limed et Yisrael shiyu omrim ken belechisha. So Moshe came down from Mount Sinai and he taught the Jewish people that they should say the same phrase, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. They should say it quietly, and we say it after the first line of Shema before continuing with the rest of the Shema. Okay, today in Nachnom Yomi we are reading Isaiah's vision of the heavenly court, chapter 6. Nice synchronicity. Yes, okay. Wait till you get to Yechezkel, but yes. Okay, so the angels are copying us, and we copy the angels because Moshe heard them say it and gave it to us to say this idea. So, where is God's glory? What does that mean when we talk about God's place, or the place of God's glory? I'll start at the end or the middle. Nefesh HaChaim. It's interesting that on Shabbat I was reading a collection of writings from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, and he was talking about 4 different views of a concept called Tzimtzum, and he contrasts the Baal HaTanya, the Baal HaTanya's view, Shneer Zalman of Liadi's view, with that of the Vilna Gaon, and the Nefesh HaChaim, Rav Chaim of Volozhin, who was a student of the Vilna Gaon. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says that the Nefesh HaChaim disagrees with the Vilna Gaon and is much more similar, although different, than the view of the Baal HaTanya, and he must have been influenced by Chabad to make this. But which I think he's. I mean, who am I to agree or disagree? But I think it's clear. There are some people who say that if the Nefesh HaChaim says it, it must be the view of the Vilna Gaon, and therefore there's no real dispute between the Vilna Gaon and the Baal HaTanya. I think, like the Rebbe, that somehow, and I can't explain how or why, Nefesh HaChaim moved away from the view of his Rebbe on this most fundamental idea, and it kind of has there's 4 different possible views, so he has the third of the 4 views. And I'm going to try and not get into it too deeply because it messes with my head, but also I have to get into it a little bit. Anyway, says Nefesh HaChaim, all of the angels above, Shoalin, they ask, where is his place? Right, which we say in Kedusha on Shabbat and Musaf. Because they are unable to understand or to attain what the idea of God's place in the world. And this is what the rabbis meant when they said in Perek Ein Doshim, they said, when the angels say, blessed is God's glory from his place, that means nobody knows where his place is. Moshe Rabbeinu wants to find where God's place is, when he said to God, if you remember in Pasha Kitisa, he says to God, show me your glory. He wants to know where the place is of God's glory. And God said, I can't show you my face, you can see my back, whatever. So, Veloni Tanlo, Nefesh HaChaim says, even Moshe was not able to see where God's place is. Only God himself, who knows himself, God is the only being that knows this idea of where his place is. God's secrets are only for God. We have no permission to contemplate on these ideas. Except for what we're permitted to learn, the revealed things we're allowed to try and understand. V'ho b'bechina shemitzidenu shnegrahu yitbarach shema b'china sovev kol almin. So here's the idea of the Nefesh HaChaim, which is such a profound idea, and I can't believe I lived 40 years of my life without knowing this idea of the Nefesh HaChaim. But he makes this distinction between the world from our perspective and the world from God's perspective. So from our perspective, from a human vantage point, we perceive God as Sovev Kol Almin, that God is outside the world, in a sense, right? We don't perceive God in the world at all times. Because God contracted his will, his glory, so that we with our eyes can perceive a world, forces, creatures, creations. We don't see just God. We don't see God's hand in everything that happens. We perceive a world where we don't see God, where we say Baruch Kvod Hashem Mimkamah, wherever God's glory is, we don't know. That's what Tzimtzum means, says Nefesh HaChaim, that it means that from our perspective, we rarely see God, and even when we do see miracles, we don't see God directly in the world. We imagine or we perceive that the world is real and that God is somehow outside of that. However, lezot chayavim anachnu nedav lekbol libenu emunat uman bal talmud. So we are obligated to know, to set in our hearts with a complete faith, shemitzidenu vaday sheyesh chiluk mekomot v'inyanim shonim, that from our perspective there is a distinction between different places and different ideas and different concepts. L'inyan dina v'hilchate rabati, right? There's different statuses. We have, I don't know, this place is this thing is tahor, this thing is tameh. This place is holy, this place is impure. This food is kosher, this food is not kosher. That's all from our perspective, and these things have meaning from our perspective. Kamosh, I don't know what that stands for. Ki hi pinat yesod ha'amunah v'ikasher shatorah v'mitzvot kulam. This is a principle, fundamental principle of faith, and the building block of the Torah and the mitzvot, that our actions make a difference, and that if we eat one thing, it's good, and we eat another thing, it's bad. If we do this mitzvah, it's good. If we don't do this mitzvah, it's bad. If we do this sin, it's right. All of that is from our perspective. Because from God's perspective, nothing ever changes. It's as if the world doesn't exist. There is no God in his place is only God. There's nothing else. And we're meaningless, and there's nothing that really exists. But from our perspective, in this world of Tzimtzum, we have an obligation to believe that our actions are meaningful and powerful, and everything we do makes a difference. So when we say, Kadosh, Melokolas Kvodo, that God's presence fills the earth, that's the ideal. That's our aspiration. That's our kind of, from God's perspective, right? We say that God fills the earth. And if God fills the earth, there's no such thing as purity and impurity, because everything is Kadosh. But then we say, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Kvod Hashem Mimkamo, blessed is God from his place, because that's his place. We've got our place. Our place is the earth, and that's where we're going to do our mitzvot. So that's why I would look down saying Kedusha, because my task, my role in the world is to be involved in the physical world, even though it's not the real world if I'm looking at God's perspective, at God's holiness, where there's only holiness. I'm not sure I'm making sense, and it's late at night. So if you don't fully understand me, I apologize. I'm not sure I fully understand myself either. So this idea, this idea of the Nefesh HaChaim is kind of a compromise between Baal HaTanya, who says that fundamentally the world doesn't exist. Everything is God's presence, and it's an illusion that we think we have free choice, an illusion that we think our mitzvot make a difference, an illusion and it's an illusion we need and we should work within, but it's ultimately everything is God, which is close to paganism, panentheism. Everything is God, again, super simplifying this. The Vilna Gaon, in contrast, says that God's tzimtzum means the main thing is he's outside the world, kvod Hashem mimkomo, and it's as if there's no God in the world, and all our actions are meaningful and important because we're acting in a world that really exists from our perspective. Well, not from our perspective, that we're acting in the real world. Our choices are meaningful, and I think that is, in a nutshell, the distinction of philosophy between Chassidut and Mitnagdut, about whether, if I'm just supposed to go through the actions because I'm supposed to, but fundamentally it's not meaningful, so I listen to what my Rebbe says, and my Rebbe knows best, and I do what he says, because that's what God wants from me. And if my actions are meaningful, then the decision to make those actions is also meaningful, and my role is to think and understand and choose for myself and not listen to what somebody else tells me to do. Okay. I'm going to go back to Rambam, who doesn't hold from any of this at all. Completely different concept. He says makom means something entirely different. Rambam, guide for the perplexed. Makom, ze ha-Shem ikar hanachato lemakom hamiyuchad v'lekola. The word makom means a specific place and space in general. And then the language expanded, and the idea of place became a place of standing, of where a person is and his values. A person's perfection. He's reached first place, right? He's in the Olympics. He stands on the top in won the gold medal. He's in first place. Rambam's example. Pardon me. This person has reached the place of that other person. So that's a borrowed use of the word place. I'm not literally standing in that person's place, but I've reached that level. This is a common idea of authors to use this meaning of the word place. They say this person fills the place of his fathers. Again, it doesn't mean he's standing in their shoes literally, but it means he's standing in their shoes metaphorically. He fills his parents' place in his wisdom, his fear of God. Or they could say this dispute stands in its place, meaning it's still existing. It's on its level, the same level it was on before. So when we say, blessed is God in his place, it's not a physical place. Of course it's not a physical place. It means whatever God is, that's what he is. That's his blessing in that metaphorical use of the word place. He's not there or here. It's just a metaphor. Anytime we use the word makom in reference to God, the level of God's existence, there's no measure to God's existence, there's nothing similar to it, just like I'll prove to you later on. So for Rambam we say Baruch Kavod Hashem, Baruch Shem Kvod, no, Baruch Kvod Hashem Mimkamo means God's glory is blessed as it is. It's blessed as it is. Okay, so Nefesh Chaim was written against Hasidic position. You said Nefesh Chaim is against some aspects of Chassidut, but in terms of Tzimtzum, I believe that it's not the same as the Baal HaTanya's view, and I really don't want to get into that too much, but it's at least as similar to Baal HaTanya as it is to Vilna Gaon's view of Tzimtzum. I wrote about this you can find online if you look up my name in Tzimtzum, you'll find things I wrote. So Nefesh Chaim, yes, it's written against Chassidut, but also the first rabbi I learned Nefesh Chaim with was a Kal and a Chassid, because Chassidim aren't as scared of Nefesh Chaim as they make out. Okay, fine. So Yeah, okay, more Rambam. Mashal, another example, I'm going to run out of time, but Masha bi'anuhu hinem me'inyan makom b'amrak baruch kvad Hashem mimkomo, right? Blessed is God's glory in his place. Shata teda kizinyan be'atzmo hu inyan makom. That is what God's place, God's glory is his place. B'amra hinem makom iti. God says to Moshe when he goes up to heaven, there's a place with me, madreget iyun v'ashkafat shekol lo hashkafat seichel lo hashkafat. There's a level you can reach that Moses has reached, not a physical place, but a conceptual idea of place. So that's what place means. Either the whole world is filled with God's glory because God is everything in the world and there's nothing else except for God, or God is outside of the world, and where is he? Wherever he is, he should be blessed in that place. And at some level, both have to be true, and the relative weight we give to each one defines how we understand our relationship to God. Yes, the world is an illusion. That's the view of the Balatanya. And as I say, the view of the Nefesh HaChaim is more similar to the idea the world is an illusion. The view of the Vilna Gaon is the world is real. That's basically the machloket in a nutshell. So when we talk about kedusha, what is holiness? So the famous Ramban on Kedushim to you, Rambam speaks, Rashi speaks of holiness means keep away from sexual immorality. And Ramban says that's very limiting. That's not really what holiness means, but rather holiness means keeping away from things, not only things you shouldn't be doing, but even things that you could do, but really you could do better, right? That fundamentally the idea of kedusha is to separate yourself from something else. We find, just Ramban does not say this, but we find in the laws of truma that if you mix you separate truma, your tithe, from your product, from your produce, and then it gets mixed. No, sorry. Kilayim, if you grow wheat and grain next to each other, then it says it becomes kadosh. Not holy in the sense of pure and good, but kadosh in the sense of separated. You can't eat it anymore. It's no longer kosher. It's separated from what you're allowed to do. So Ramban says the idea, we also find in the Arayot, right, in Acharemot, it says, no, it doesn't. Never mind. Ramban says kedusha is separation. And then he has this idea of nivul b'reshut Torah, that the Torah allows you to do all sorts of, there are things that are permitted by Torah law, but separating yourself from them makes you more holy, right? So, I don't know, you can overeat and you can drink too much wine and you can do all sorts of things. A level of abstinence is what makes a person holy, not the extreme of some sects in other religions where they separate themselves entirely from worldly things. That's not a goal of Judaism. I'm not going to go into that. But a certain degree of separation is a certain degree of kedusha. An example is the Nazir, who forbids him or herself from drinking wine, and he has a certain kedusha because he separated himself from drinking wine. And says Ramban that people who do the separation are called prushim. The Pharisees are the ones who separate themselves from these kinds of things. I think they're the ones who separated themselves from the Sadducees, but that's beside the point. It's unusual for Rambam and Ramban to agree, but Rambam also says the idea of sanctity, of kedusha, is to separate yourselves from sensuality, from physicality. So separate yourself from too much marital relations, separate yourself from wine. Again, not forbidden, but limited, mitigated. That's the idea of kedusha, somewhat separated, not giving in to all of your desires all of the time. And now we get to the Tanya, and so we're going to say the world is an illusion. So kedusha lashon havdalah. This is a Likutei Amarim book, the first book in the book that we call the Tanya. Kedusha is a concept of Havdalah, like Ramban said. That God is separate from all of the worlds of His creation. That is the concept Sovev Kol Almin, which the Balaton uses in the opposite sense of the Vilna Gaon. But Sovev Kol Almin means God before the Tzimtzum, before the creation of the world. There was just God and nothing else. That's God's Kedusha, that He's just, there's nothing else, there's no existence, there's nothing except for God, and as Sarah said, the world is an illusion because there's only God. You can't connect to this idea through the unity or the spark, I can't think of the right words, of the soul, and its sustenance from God's infinite light. That soul connects with God, with God's infinity, with God separate from the world. It becomes totally united with God, and when you get to that level, the world doesn't exist anymore. There's just God, because everything is God. And that's what Kedusha, ultimate Kedusha, is to connect to that aspect of God, which shows you that the world is an illusion. And I'm going to run out of time, so I'm just going to skip this, but that's the idea over there. I want to end with a couple of ideas. Avad Rabbi Natan says that, as we said at the beginning, we say Kedusha, and the angels will say Kedusha. But who's better? So Yisrael Nikru Kedoshim, Israelites. Israel is called holy. Malachei Asher Nikrim Kedoshim, and angels are called holy. Yisrael Menayin Shnema Kadosh Yisrael Hashem. Israel is called holy to God. Malachei Asher Menayin Shnema Big Izrat Irin Pitgama Omama Kadishin Shalta. Daniel, I can't translate it's Aramaic, but they're called holy. Lo Yadata Eza. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Lo Yadati Eza. I don't know whether people are more holy or angels are more holy. When it's Hashem when it says that the Israelites are holy to God, the God of Israel, God says to the Israelites, to the Jews, you are more holy to me than the angels are. So I don't know what more holy means, but that's we do it first, we do it best, we do it more importantly than the angels do. And I want to finish with the kedusha, this idea of Kiddush Hashem. So, and I'll do it quickly, and I'll try and speak slowly, even though I want to do it quickly. You probably are familiar with this Rambam at the end of Shemitah v'Yovel. He's talking here about the Shemitah and Yovel. And in fact, the whole book of Esrei is tithes you have to give to Leviim, tithes you have to give to the Kohanim, and tithes you have to give to poor people. So he ends up by saying, why does the tribe of Levi not have a portion of the land of Israel? How come Levi, the Kohanim and the Levites, can't do these mitzvot of that are so fundamental, the mitzvot connected to the land of Israel? And he says the reason is because their job is not to work the land, but to be the teachers of the Jewish people, to learn the Torah and to teach the Torah and to spread the Torah. And that's their role as leaders, as spiritual leaders, as rabbis, as teachers. And because of that, they're not expected to spend their days farming, planting. I'm embarrassed to say, but I watched Clarkson's Farm and I quite enjoyed it. And if you watch a program about farming, you see it's an all-encompassing from morning till night, and even beyond that, you're working on the farm. You haven't got time to sit and learn Torah and teach Torah unless you make a huge effort. So the tribe of Levi was set aside to not have to deal with the physicality of the world, so that they could not only learn Torah, but teach Torah and spread the ideas of spirituality around. And then Rambam says, Lo shevet Levi b'levad. It's not only, even though the tribe of Levi didn't get a land, it's not only the tribe of Levi who could have this potential role of being spiritual and leaders and teachers, but rather anybody who chooses to set himself aside. Right, the idea of kedusha is to be set aside. You set yourself aside from all of the physical burdens that one has, all of the economic and financial issues, and you dedicate yourself to, right, he says, dedicate yourself to serving God, then also you become Harezin is Kadesh, Kadosh Kadashim. He becomes holy of holies and has God's portion. And I just want to point out, this is not even non-Jewish people. Rambam is very clear to say, Kol ish v'ish mikol ba'olam. Any person from anywhere in the world can choose to take on this role. And I'm just going to move quickly. The Torah in Vayikra talks about the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, and Rambam in Yesodei Torah talks about mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. And what he says, we think of Kiddush Hashem as martyrdom. And it is. But Rambam begins writing about it as living in a godly way. Kol Beit Yisrael mitzvah Kiddush Hashem. All the Jews are commanded to Kiddush Hashem, etc., etc., etc. And he says, what does that mean? That when you're forced to do something, when a non-Jew forces you to do a sin, then you do it. You do it, right? Unless it's one of the three bad ones. But if you have to do a sin, you do that because you have to live, and you can't sanctify God's name unless you're alive. That gives you more opportunity to sanctify God's name. And then he says, anyone who breaks the mitzvot, doesn't keep the mitzvot, is not sanctifying God's name. Anyone who does not break a mitzvah, anyone who sits and does not do a sin, or who keeps the mitzvot, is called kadosh, like Yosef, who ran away from Potiphar's wife. It says, Harezim mikadesh et Hashem. That is called sanctifying God's name, or sanctifying God. And somebody who is stringent with himself and does, well, I will just read the English just because we have a minute left. When a sage is stringent with himself, speaks pleasantly with others, his social conduct is attractive to others. He receives them pleasantly. He is humbled by them and does not humble them in return. He honors them, even though they disrespect him. He does business faithfully and does not frequently accept the hospitality of the common people who sit with him. At all times is only seen studying Torah, wrapped in tzitzit, crowned with tefillin, carrying out all his deeds beyond the measure of the law, provided he does not separate too far from normal living and thus become forlorn. To the extent that all praise him, love him, and find his deeds attractive, such a person sanctifies God's name. The verse in Isaiah is, he said to me, Israel, you are my servant, in whom I will be glorified. That refers to him. Kiddush Hashem is living in a way that people look up to you, admire you, respect you for your actions. And unfortunately, Kiddush Hashem is also martyrdom, so I'll end with that. Thank you very much. See you next week. We'll talk about wisdom and the fourth blessing of Shemoneh Esrei. Have a good week.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you.